Have you ever found yourself wondering why it is that Sally over there is so good at what she's doing and feels like God is blessing every endeavor that she makes? This episode is for you because we're going to dive into what it is you are uniquely called to do and what are those unique strengths that God has given you to equip you to do that. So stay tuned. Hey friend, welcome to the Milk and Honey with Lemon podcast. Do you want financial freedom and to step into your God-given leadership? Do you find yourself up late at night Googling leadership, maybe the Proverbs 31 woman or motherhood in business? Do you wake up with these big, beautiful, ambitious goals only to feel stressed about who God actually called you to be when your kiddos interrupt your time with the Lord and then you feel disconnected from God again? Hey, I'm Lemon, and I was in that same place. I knew I was meant for more than what it was I was doing, and I felt frustrated and disconnected, and I wished I could step fully into my purpose. I wanted to really have this deep heart connection with God and figure out who I was in Him as a daughter. But I kept telling myself, I don't really have a place in leadership, and I'm only meant to just stay home and raise babies and make my sourdough bread. I could just worry about these other things about myself later. Until I found out how to become this Proverbs 31 woman through leadership development. In this podcast, you will find financial freedom, leadership growth, and motivation so that you will be able to do all the things God has called you to do with ease. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to encourage you to go to the show notes, click on the sneak peek of my community because I actually teach a 12-week course on how to figure out what your purpose is and really lean into your strengths. And so you can access that for free for 24 hours by just going to the show notes, or you can click on girlpoweralliance.com/lemon and sign up for the sneak peek, and you will see my course is called Finding Your Purpose. I am so excited to dive into today's episode and talk about how do we tap into our unique strengths and the things that we feel like we're called to do and what even are those unique strengths. So, quick story. So I was raised in an anti-Christian household. If you've listened to any episode before, you know that about me. And when I became a Christian, I was very legalistic and I belonged to some churches that told me my only worth was in my womb, that no good, godly man would love me if I ran a business or any of those things. And so I suppressed these things that I felt like I was supposed to do, but I chalked it up to being disobedient, or maybe it's this old sinful nature that's creeping in, and that I'm actually not meant to do anything other than mop the kitchen and make fresh pasta. And I thought that was all I was really meant for. And that was the only sort of value that I could bring to the table until I met my husband. And my husband is the most encouraging person that I have ever met. And he is so incredibly supportive. And so when I met my husband and he encouraged me in these things that I had been suppressing, and of course I told him, I'm like, oh, I would really love to do this, or I see myself doing that, but I don't think it's for me. I don't know that I'm capable or called to do that. He pushed me to go and figure out where I was and where God wanted to lead me. And so now I teach a biblical leadership class. I teach classes on how to find your purpose. I podcast. I do all of these things that I feel like I was uniquely called to do, but I still get to tend to the garden. I'm still present with my family. And so I get to have both. And I feel, and I don't have it perfect. Do not get me wrong. Nothing is perfect, but I do feel like I've been able to really step into who this Proverbs 31 woman is and really become her. And it's because of the leadership development that I've done and because I've leaned into who it is I feel like God has called me to be. And so get out a pen and paper because I want to talk to you about how do you tap into your unique strengths that God has given you. So first and foremost, the thing that you're called to do is unique and special from God. Your talents and your spiritual gifts come from God. And so Psalm 139:14 reminds us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So we have to start with that as the basis of our discovery. God made you uniquely you and gave you the gifts and the talents and spiritual gifts for a purpose. And I want to just say that and I'm going to get into this later, but our gifts and talents actually have nothing to do with us. And when we realize that our gifts and talents are meant for evangelism and to glorify God, we treat them a whole lot differently. And I want you to get out your pen and paper, and I want you to write down the things that you are naturally good at. So it could be these things that you had an aptitude for or passions at an early age, like whatever those things are, I want you to write them down. Feel free to pause me and go and do that. Hopefully you paused me and you just went and made a whole list of things that you are naturally good at or passionate about. And then I want you to think about spiritual gifts. And if you don't know what your spiritual gifts are, there's a test. It's the spiritual gift test. Just Google it. And I don't put stock in saying that once you take this, it will tell you exactly what you need to know. And then those are your spiritual gifts. I think it's a really good place as a jump off point. It's a really good place to give you some inkling as to where God may have gifted you in a certain area. And then I would encourage you to read up about that gift. I would encourage you to ask God if that is your spiritual gift and talk to other believers who know you. So write that down. And when you see that God's given you these natural passions, these natural things that you're good at, and your spiritual gifts, I think it's a whole lot easier to figure out what your purpose is because you see some sort of alignment in that for you. And both natural gifts and spiritual gifts, they are this beautiful part of God's design for us. So you have to embrace them and celebrate them. And when we don't embrace and celebrate them, we are telling the enemy that we align with his design. And we don't want to do that. We want to align with God's design and God's purpose for us. And the only way to do that is to be okay with the gifts and talents that God has given you and stop shaming ourselves for having these gifts and talents. Next, I want to talk about the parable of the talents. I love the parable of the talents because we can view our natural gifts and our spiritual gifts through the parable of the talents. If you don't know the parable of the talents, it's in Matthew. I would recommend you go read it and read it with this lens and let me apply it to the things God has given me. Because God gives us natural gifts and he gives us spiritual gifts so that we can multiply them, so that we can glorify him. And so it is this beautiful call to action in that parable to really emphasize what it is that God's desire is for us and to cultivate and both use these natural gifts that he has given us and our spirit-given gifts for his kingdom growth. And the thing that always gets me about the parable of the talents is when the master returns and one of them says that he took his talent and he buried it. He took his talent and he buried it. And he didn't multiply it or anything. And the master comes back and he says, "You wicked and lazy servant." And then he takes his talent away. He takes the talent away and he calls him wicked and lazy. The other two, they went out and they invested and they sowed into the talent that was given to them in order to multiply and to bring glory. And it's the same thing with the things that God has given to us. We have a responsibility as believers. God has given you this thing. He has trusted you with this thing. And so you have a responsibility as a believer to then go and nurture it and pour into it and sow into it. And if not, that parable says, "You wicked and lazy servant," and then takes the talent away. And I know that sounds so harsh to think about because it is. It is. God has given you this talent or this purpose or this unique strength because he trusts you with it. And if you're not going to use it, if you're not going to sow into it, if you are going to bury the thing that God has given to you, he's going to take it away. And I know that you and we don't want that. That's not our goal. And then I could do a whole episode on this. Maybe we should do a whole episode on this. Next, and this is the last piece, is that we are the body of Christ. We are the church. And so because of that, the arm and the head and the feet and the gut and all these things, they work together. It's how our body functions. And so too then do your natural gifts and talents. Here's the thing. The combination of spiritual gifts and natural talents and passions that you have, chances are nobody else has that. I don't know the statistics, but I can confidently say that nobody else has the exact same combination of things that you have. And so when we don't figure out what it is that we're passionate about, we don't figure out what we're spiritually gifted in, we don't figure out what we're naturally gifted in, and then we don't sow into it and develop it and embrace it, we do the body a disservice. We need every single person's gifts and talents to have a harmonious and functioning body. This is why it is so important that you figure out what it is that you're called to do and then sow into it, completely sow into what it means to be a believer and what it means to be a talented believer. Because the thing is, like I said in the beginning, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. God made you for a purpose, with a purpose, and it is meant to bring glory to Him. And so you have a responsibility to figure out what that is. You have a responsibility to the body to figure out what that is. And so I want to encourage you to, again, take this test. If you're like, I don't know, you're looking at this list and you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Lemon. Take it to the Father and ask Him what it is that you're called to do. What are you uniquely positioned to do? What is the thing that God has given to you naturally? James 1:5 says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, and He will give to all men liberally. If you're lacking wisdom, go ask of God. He will tell you exactly what it is you need to know. To me, that's really the ultimate advice I can give you, is to make this list, take a test, go study, go confirm with other believers the thing that you think you are called to do, the thing you think you are supposed to do, where you think your strengths lie. I always find it so interesting when I ask other people what they think my strengths are, it's usually different than what I think my strengths are because they see me differently. They see me leading differently. They see me show up differently. I'm comparing what I think my strengths are to the lows, where they are seeing my strengths through the highs. And so asking people what it is that you think, what they think that you're naturally gifted in, what they think you're spiritually gifted in, what do people naturally come to you for? All of those down and then take it to God. That's the best way, personally, to tell you to go and figure out what it is that you feel like you're called to do, my friend. Now, if you're sitting here and you're like, this is all great, Lemon, but I need a deeper dive on this, then great. Go to the show notes, click on get a sneak peek of my community, and go take the Finding Your Purpose course. Go dive in. You'll have free access for 24 hours, so do it when you're ready to do that. But dive into that program, dive into that course, because it will change everything for you. The testimonials are incredible. I wish I could just share them all here, but they're deeply personal. But it is transformational. So go to the show notes, go click on sneak peek of my community, and go take the Finding Your Purpose course. Even if you get through the first 1 or 2 lessons, it will help you figure out where you are naturally gifted and talented. So I hope that you love that little gift. Go check that out. Hey friend, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and share this episode with a friend who may need a little help finding their purpose? Also, please be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It lights me up so much to know this podcast is helping you. And so I'm actually going to head out. I've got to go teach another round of Radiant Leadership Academy and empower women who really want to step into their purpose and be like Christ. So I'll be back here on Monday for another episode. Bye, friend.